you to everyone for coming here. I realize that if you are here, you want to be here, and that's great because there's, as I'll explain during this meeting, this online meeting, not a lot of people want to cover court. Some people are intimidated. Some young reporters, most young reporters, I would say, are intimidated by covering court. And I don't. It's much to my benefit to train people to demystify courts and to remove that intimidation, because it's hard to find people who can cover courts as well, or in addition to me. I'll just give you an example of what I mean. That just it happened this morning. It happened now today, while I was preparing for this. There's a murder case that I've been covering. It's the murder a man who was charged with second-degree murder at the Montreal courthouse. The murder of a man named Tommy Dugas. He was shot in Point Claire in the parking lot of the Holiday Inn, that big, famous, tall Holiday Inn in Point Claire near the Fairview Mall, and he died in 2018. We have a lot of readers there. That's why I decided to cover the trial. I covered the opening statement, the prosecution's opening statement. It's kind of a standard part of a trial, where the Crown basically gives you an outline of what the evidence is going to be heard during the trial, what the jury is going to hear. So I covered that. I covered a few days. It was a very, very interesting trial. I don't know if you followed it, but unfortunately, the victim was found dead in this parking lot. And when they did the autopsy, they found $20,000 hidden in his underwear. And it turns out it was a drug deal that went bad, or maybe even a robbery, a planned robbery. It's not clear. It's still not clear now what really happened. The only people who knows is the shooter and the victim, and the victim's dead. The trial continued last week. I was working late shifts. Everyone at the Gazette has to do late shifts, so I was unable to cover the trial last week. We didn't have anyone available to cover the trial last week, so we missed the accused testified in the murder trial, which is actually quite rare. And I was hoping I would be able to cover it, but we weren't able to cover his testimony. We weren't able to cover the closing arguments in the trial. The closing arguments are made by both sides when a trial ends. The Crown summarizes their case, and the defense summarizes their case. So we missed that as well. I was kind of disappointed. So this week, I dedicated myself to covering the trial again. I ended up having to cover all that was left yesterday was the judge's instructions, the judge's final instructions to the jury, which is always, even judges will admit, it's the most boring part of the trial. I ended up covering that, but in doing that, I was able to summarize the trial. And the jury began deliberating yesterday. So to explain the legal words or legal terms that you come up with that Robin mentioned, the jury began deliberating yesterday. That's when they've heard all the evidence, they've received the final instructions from the judge, and they begin to decide whether the person is guilty or not. They were given an option to find him guilty of Mr. Jerome Latham, guilty of second-degree murder or manslaughter, or to acquit him, because he when he testified, he said, "I didn't bring the gun to this argument that happened. The victim, Tommy Dugas, pulled a gun on me. I tried to grab it from him. The gun went off, and then his term was the gun flew out of my hand." And the Crown kind of said, "Well, that doesn't make sense because the gun ended up 34 meters away from the body. So a gun." His quote was, "Birds fly, but guns don't." We put it in the headline. I put it in I thought it was a good quote. We put it in the story. So this morning, I dedicated myself to continuing to prepare for what we're doing right now. And as normal, this is typical of my life. The jury delivered its verdict at 11 o'clock. Knowing, because I know, because of my experience in covering courts, I knew that there's a clerk in every courtroom in a jury trial. The clerk works basically for the judge. And they're also like a go-between between journalists or lawyers and the judge. So I knew the clerk very well. So I asked her, "Can you?" I gave her my business card. I've given it to her probably a dozen times in my career, with my cell phone number on it. I said, "Just can you call me to let me know when there's an envelope from the jury?" That this is another step in another legal thing that I can explain that Robin made reference to this morning earlier. An envelope is the jury's deliberating. The only way that they can communicate with a judge is through an envelope. They send the judge, either they have a question for the judge saying, we don't really understand what your instructions were, or a part of your instructions. Can you re-explain it? Or can you explain it again, to use proper English? Or can you, or they send an envelope saying, we have a verdict. Normally, it takes about 2 or 3 days, especially when there's something to debate. And because the accused, Mr. Latham, testified last week, he opened the door to all kinds of possibilities, either manslaughter or an acquittal. And normally a jury likes to chew on that for a while before they come up with a verdict. But they came up with their verdict in less than a day, which was quite surprising. So I was working from home because the courthouse, the media room at the courthouse can get quite noisy. And it wouldn't have been appropriate to do this in that room. It can get very, very boisterous when a lot of things are going on at the courthouse. So I decided to do it here. But I got the phone call from the clerk. She advised me. So the plan was, often reporters work together. A friend of mine and a colleague who works for the Journal Montreal was supposed to go to. When I got that phone call, I was supposed to tip off 2 other journalists. Unfortunately, one of them is in a hospital because he had appendicitis and he had to have his appendix removed. And my friend at the Journal Montreal was busy covering something else. So he couldn't go. He just said, "Look, sorry, buddy, I can't go. I can't cover it." So what I ended up doing, this is how we cover things in modern times, with everything being electronic now. I just sent an email to the prosecutor and I just said, "Look, I know an envelope was sent. Can you let me know what the verdict was?" So he did. We had a bit of an email exchange to get the details down, but let's say just before, an hour before this happened, I was able to put together a story, a 500-word story about the verdict. I did it all from memory. So I was able to write a 500. I'm not trying to boast. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just trying to show you the reality of what happens. Got the verdict out. I believe we're the first to report the verdict. And I was able to tweet about it about a half an hour ago. So that I mentioned this to explain how things go at the courthouse, and also to explain why I joined Robin a little late. So sorry, Robin, for contacting you late. We were supposed to prepare a little bit earlier to make sure the connection was good. So so let me explain, and by all means, if my goal here today is to, like I said, to demystify. I don't want young reporters to be intimidated when they go to the courthouse. If you have any question right now, or if you have any question as we go along and you'd like to ask it, I guess like the best way maybe would be to signal Robin in some way. If you want to ask it, I don't mind being interrupted to answer. I would rather address something that is on your mind than to blather on about myself and how I think court should be covered. I'd really, if someone has you're obviously all here because you want to be here. I'm impressed by that. And if you have any questions, if there's anything that's a mystery to you, please, by all means, ask the question. I'll pause here right away if you have any questions. If not, I'll start with why I enjoy covering crime, and why I enjoy covering. I think someone has a. Oh, sorry. The good question. Go on Twitter if you want to find that out. No, I'm just joking. It was manslaughter. They found him guilty of manslaughter, and that's what's interesting there. It's a very good question. It was manslaughter. What's interesting there for me is, he was originally charged with second-degree murder. And that's what the prosecution argued throughout the whole case, that this man is guilty of second-degree murder. But he testified, and he said, "Look, there was a dispute, there was an argument. He pulled the gun on me. I grabbed it from him, and the gun went off. Like, whether the jury believed him or not, we'll never know. Jury deliberations are secret in Canada, completely secret. You could be, they could, if a juror came forward to me, said, "Hey, here's what we discussed during our deliberations," both he and I, and if I published a story about that, both he and I could go to jail for that. That's actually a crime in the criminal code. So he was found guilty of murder, which is a sign that the jury believed part of it, that believed that something was up. And to me, a key part of it, I don't want to turn this whole thing into a discussion of the trial, but a key part of it was that, for me, was that there was a woman who drove the victim and 3 other men to the drug deal. It was very strange. This is a 5 kilogram cocaine deal. This doesn't go on every day. There's only so many cocaine people who deal in cocaine who can deal at what they call the kilogram level. So the victim thought he was going to buy 5 kilograms of cocaine from Mr. Latham, and everything went wrong, and Mr. Dugas ended up dead. But the strange thing was, during the trial, and where the defense, I found, really made some marks, was that the woman who drove Mr. Dugas and the 3 other men to the drug deal, she was testifying for the prosecution, but she was asked by the defense later. The defense raised this point that had not come up at all from the Crown. They said, "You're a race car driver, aren't you? You had like 6 or 10 years experience as a race car driver." She said, "Yeah." And the defense lawyer asked, "You're known for being able to get out of any sticky situation, even if there's like heavy traffic. Am I not right? You once told that to the police." And the woman race car driver, she boasted, "Yeah, I am. That is my reputation." So it raises the question: if you're about to do a peaceful drug transaction where you're not expecting any trouble, why did you insist on having this race car driver with you? And why do you have 3 other people with you? That's very unusual. Normally, you want the least amount of witnesses possible to a cocaine deal like that, because you could be sent away easily for 6 years. So why have 3 other potential witnesses with you? So what the defense was implying was, this was not your plan to buy 5 kilograms of cocaine. This was a plot to rob Mr. Latham of his money. I think that's where the jury was maybe convinced something else was going on here. We haven't got the full story. I think that's why they reached what you would call a compromise verdict, and they convicted him of manslaughter. So that's the long answer to that very good question. And I'm sorry I didn't say it outright. I guess I was trying to drive you guys to our website, the Gazette's website. Anyway, so are there any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm in my 5th year of university now. So I think when I did the class, I had a class where they taught us the basics of court reporting, but it's been so long now that I feel kind of like I've forgotten a lot of basics. So I was wondering, like, when you go into the court, how do you know what are the cases that are happening that day? And then as well, if you're following a particular case, how do you know when there's going to be another hearing in the future? How do you know the next date?
Sure. Both excellent questions. Sorry, what's your name?
Miriam?
Miriam, those are both excellent questions, and I'll tell you why. Because reporters today, myself and other experienced reporters who actually work at the courthouse, there's a media room for the courthouse. We face this like once a week, where either young reporters or students at university, they come and they show up and they have no clue and they're desperate, and they'll grab us in the hallways, or they'll come knocking on the media courtroom door and beg us for help. To answer your question as best I can, there's at any courthouse at all in Quebec, even in Canada, there is what's called the roll, ROLE. At the Montreal courthouse, the one you'll likely end up covering the most, at the Montreal courthouse, it's on the 3rd floor of the Montreal courthouse. That is what is considered the main floor, because there's a big open area to the public there. But it's a bit confusing because the other people consider the main floor the 1st floor, which is that opens up from the first floor opens up from Saint Antoine. The third floor, what I consider the main floor, opens up from Notre Dame and Saint Laurent. That's one a lot of people use, but if you're coming from the metro, people tend to use the one on Saint Antoine. So let's imagine you've been sent from your assignment editor. You jump on the metro, you get out at Place d'Armes. You get out at Place d'Armes, you head to the Palais de Justice de Montréal, the Montreal courthouse. If you go in from Saint Antoine, you go up to the third floor in this wide, very wide public area. It's posted on a wall in a glass case. It's the roll. It's a long, long list. Usually it's about 10 pages long of who has cases at the courthouse. So it's in alphabetical order. You just go, you look, you find the name, the room number is there, and usually if you're lucky, they also have the lawyers involved. That's where you should take notes right away. Boom. Write down the accused name just to remind yourself. Take down the room number. It's easy to forget it. And but write down the name of the lawyers too, because that's key. So if you go to then it'll say what time the thing. Typically, court hearings start at 9:30. So you go into the courtroom at 9:30. Just an aside, in this time of COVID-19, a lot of the seats in a courtroom are no longer available to allow for social distancing. They have these very poorly designed courtrooms where there's maybe just 3 very short rows of seats. And because of COVID-19, only 2 or 3 seats are available in the courtroom. This is all stuff you might experience if you go to the courthouse. But anyway, so if you cover the court hearing, usually like most court hearings before a long trial, most court hearings are very short, very brief. So you could end up being there maybe 15, 20 minutes. It's at the end of each, to answer your second question, at the end of each court hearing, the judges and the lawyers sort out when they're going to meet next. That's the thing. It could end up that actually could end up taking up most of a hearing, where they argue, "Oh, my calendar doesn't work out. My calendar doesn't work out." I'm not joking. It could end up taking 20 minutes for them to set a date, but they will set a date, and that's where you take your notes. Make sure you take careful notes and take note of. They'll try their best to say what date it is, what time it will be at, and most importantly, what room it's going to happen in. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, no, I was muted for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, that answers it. I guess there's that, and then there was also I still get confused about what parts of the actual proceedings are able to be public and which ones are under a publication ban, because what I remember is that certain parts of the deliberation are kind of automatically not meant to be reported. So I find that part a little confusing to remember.
Sure. Excellent question. That's the bulk of what I'm going to talk about. But I like that you asked the question, and I think it's best for me to address your question. That I think I'm explaining it. I'm explaining it better if I'm addressing your question. First of all, just to address that, you used the term deliberation. Okay. A jury's deliberation, they've heard all the evidence in a trial. They've heard everything. They've been told to go to a room in the courthouse where they meet every day, and they're also what's called sequestered. They're not allowed. They are not allowed. Their phones were taken away from them yesterday when they were sequestered. Imagine that. You young people probably going, "What? My phone is going to be taken away?" Yes, their phone, because the judge does not want the jury to go looking up stories that were published before the trial happened. A jury trial is supposed to be purely what a jury sees and hears. They're supposed to deliberate only on that. You see, once the jury was sequestered, I was able to publish a couple of details about a dodgy witness who testified. He was a drug dealer. I was able to add some details. This is what the jury didn't know. What I was also able to add was that the jury didn't know that one of the witnesses who testified basically from the grave, because he didn't appear in court personally, they played his testimony from the recording from his the preliminary inquiry, and so they listened to a recording of his testimony where a defense lawyer was able to cross-examine him. So that was fair in a sense. So the jury listened to that, but the jury was never told that, oh, by the way, this guy's dead now. I have no idea why that happened, because he only died of natural causes. I think that the judge just didn't want them to infer anything, to think that maybe he didn't die of natural causes. Maybe he was murdered. He was very young. For whatever reason, the jury wasn't allowed to hear that. So their phones were taken away. So their deliberations, they're supposed to talk to each other. The 12 people are supposed to talk to each other and say and argue or debate, what they think the verdict should be in the case. It's in the criminal code. That's not even under a publication ban. They are not allowed to ever tell us what they deliberated on. In the US, it's different. Some people who were on the jury in the famous O.J. Simpson case many years ago, they were able to write books about what they deliberated on. But in Canada, it's against the law. But I like your question about publication bans. It's a good question, and it has to be addressed. It's the main part of what I'm talking about here today. And I'll tell you about the stages of, let's say, a standard criminal trial and what happens. So let's say I was giving my young son, a lift to school today. I was telling him that I was doing this today, and he said, "Oh, well, tell me how it works." So I used the example of someone robs a bank. Okay, a guy robs a bank. It's a big robbery. Many shots are fired during the robbery. It gets a little violent. The guy gets arrested. Let's say it's on a Tuesday. He gets arrested. A lot of media are going to cover that because a gun went off and shots were fired. So a lot of media covered that crime, the day of thing. We call it the breaking news. So you go cover that. You get a few details, hopefully from the police. You talk to some witnesses, and you have a story that day. Then the police tell you, "Yeah, we arrested the guy. He's going to be charged tomorrow." What it used to be automatic that everybody in the media would cover the guy's first court appearance the day after the robbery. It's not so much now, but there are still a lot of media who cover it, including the Montreal Gazette. So first stage of the case, it's called the accused is formally charged. A lot of people call it an arraignment. That's from watching a lot of court TV, a lot of shows like SVU or NCIS or there's one show, it's called Bull, and what one judge once told a jury, he subtly called the show it's not Bull, it's bullshit, because it's fictional what a lot of these shows claim to be showing you. It's quite wrong, and it gives juries bad impressions. So that first appearance, there's no pub ban. There'll be a pub, and let's say if it's a sexual assault, there is a pub ban on the victim's name. That's standard. Media are not supposed to report, or not allowed to report, to identify or do anything that goes towards identifying the victim of a sexual assault. Or let's say if it's a case like there's this famous case that came out of Granby, where a girl was terribly abused by her parents and she ended up dead. The parents or step-parents were charged. They are currently charged, but we're not allowed to name the victim or the people accused, because I believe there's siblings involved, and if we report on it, it would go towards identifying the siblings, and there's a law that protects that. So, but in general, the first court appearance, you can, let's say it's the standard, the robbery, the bank robbery example that I gave you. You can report on the fact that he appeared before a judge. This is what he's charged with. And let's say the Crown denies, request that he be detained until he has a bail hearing. That'll happen during the first case. We call it formally charged. The person was formally charged. It's not an arraignment. An arraignment comes much later in the case in Canada. So the person's charged, and usually what can also happen when a person is formally charged, it usually takes about 30 seconds tops for this all to happen. People end up coming to the courthouse, they wait 2 or 3 hours for something that takes 30 seconds. And it happens very fast. You have to pay careful attention. But when we come out, if lawyers are comfortable with talking to the media, often they will give a comment or two on the case. Typically, there's not much to report on when that happens, but if defense lawyer is generous enough, you might end up with a few good quotes from them. So that's the first stage. Then it goes to a bail hearing stage, and I just want to give you an example of why it's important. There's a few important things to remember when you cover that first formal appearance. A lot of people blow it off and think it's insignificant, but it's not. I'll give you an example from my career. There was a horrible case many years ago where a man and his wife, it's the Shafia case. I don't know if it's going to ring any bells for anybody, but it's this couple from St. Leonard who went on a vacation with their daughters. The parents were from Afghanistan, and while they were on this vacation, they had plotted to kill their daughters. It was what do you call it? A crime because of the religious beliefs of the parents. They were ashamed of their daughters and how they felt they were posting selfies on Facebook in what most people would consider regular clothing, but which the parents found offensive. They killed their three daughters and the aunt. They made it look like an accident initially. They pushed a car into a waterway in Kingston, and all four drowned and died. So initially it looked like an accident, but then several weeks later, it was a big surprise. They were charged with murder. The police announced they're going to be charged with murder. So unfortunately, it was in Kingston. So it became a question of which media covers it. For us at the Gazette is part of a group called Post Media. For us, it was like, well, are we going to cover it? Are we going to travel back and forth to Kingston for every court date, or is the National Post going to cover this? Because it was a national story, because of the nature of the crime, the motive behind the crime. It was a national story. So there was this date, who's going to cover it, because the space is basically equal between Kingston and Montreal. But anyway, I drove down for that first formal court appearance, and it went down exactly as I said. It took 30 seconds, and what I remember is that almost all of the reporters were frustrated at how short it was, because they'd never really covered court before. They were frustrated with how short it happened, that nothing came out of it, and the lawyers involved didn't want to talk. But a few of us went over to the clerk's office, and we waited patiently for the charge to come out. This is a very important thing to me. This is the most important thing that you can get during that first formal appearance, is that you get what's called in French they call it the dénonciation. We call it in English, loosely we call it a charge sheet. It's where the charges are laid out all on paper, and normally they'll make at least one page accessible to the media, and everyone just takes out their camera phone and takes photos of it. We had to wait long for that charge sheet to come out, but and some people got frustrated and just put it in their pocket or whatever, their purse, and stormed off. They were in a really bad mood from having to wait all day. But I read the charges carefully, and what was revealed in the charges was that this was a plot that had gone on for months. It wasn't just a snap decision during the vacation. Oh, let's kill our daughters. I'm tired. I'm fed up. No, this was planned for weeks. So my lead the next day was the top of my story. The next day was this horrible thing was plotted out for several weeks. And then, well, I'll never forget is that some reporters sent me emails going, "Hey, how did you get that detail? Who told you that? How did you get it?" I go, "It was right there in the charge sheet." So basically, for that first day, everything you see and hear basically can be reported, unless it's a sexual assault case or a child abuse case. The judge usually the Crown will ask for a publication ban. Let's say if it's a standard thing. They'll ask, can we have a publication ban on the victim's name? The judge basically rubber stamps it right there. You have to listen for it. The second stage of a case is, and this is where you can run into publication bans. It's that's the bail hearing. The accused has the right to a fair trial, and there's always the potential that he will have a trial before a jury. If the trial is going to end up before a judge, there's no concern because a judge shouldn't be swayed by anything that he reads in the paper, or sees on TV, or hears on the radio, or reads on the internet. But a jury can. A very key element of something that comes out of a bail hearing can really stick to a case forever. And someone will always remember, oh, I remember that case because I remember reading an article. Well, by the time it reaches the trial stage, let's say if it goes before a jury, that evidence that came out during the bail hearing might not even be involved in the case. It might have gotten tossed out by a good defense lawyer. So they don't want that to be out there right away. It's almost automatic that a publication ban is placed on a bail hearing. It's not standard. The defense normally has to ask for it, and the judge automatically. Let me put it this way: if a defense lawyer asks for it at the start of the bail hearing, it's automatic. The judge says yes right away. There is a bail. But there are some cases. This is why it's worth it to check out bail hearings in an important case. Sometimes the defense doesn't want a publication ban on a bail hearing. I'll give you one key example of that. It was a guy named Basil Parasiris. You guys are too young, and the name probably means nothing to you. But it was a guy who, on the South Shore, in near Longueuil, or a place that's part of Longueuil. I forget the name of the town, but the Laval police thought that he was a drug dealer, that he was the head of a drug trafficking ring run by his nephew, or just where the distribution level was run by his nephew, and that he was the head of it. Laval police investigated it for several weeks, and they had reason to believe that there could be drugs inside Mr. Parasiris's house. So they conducted like a series of raids that went on simultaneously, and they conducted one at Mr. Parasiris's house. I won't get into too many details, but the police went in heavy. They did what's called they have a euphemism for it right now. They call it a dynamic entry. It's basically a very violent entry where 4 o'clock in the morning, they smash in a door, and the police go storming in. Unfortunately for one of the police officers there, his name was Daniel Tessier, there had been a series of home invasions in Mr. Parasiris's neighborhood. And when he was woken up, he had had a few drinks before he went to bed. He even took some prescription medicine. So when he woke up, he was kind of foggy. He claims he didn't hear them shouting the words police. He just heard shouting. And that when someone finally made it upstairs he grabbed his gun, a gun that he had illegally. When he opened up his bedroom door, he was greeted by a large guy that he said was in a black toque, and that he opened fire. He assumed this is a home invasion. This guy just stormed into my house. This guy's going to kill me, so I got to kill him first. So he shot him, and this police officer died. It was a huge story. Every media covered it when it initially happened. But a defense lawyer who was representing Mr. Parasiris, he was going to represent him for the bail hearing, and he told Mr. Parasiris, I really want to understand this case, so do you mind if I go look at your house before we have the bail hearing? So he went in, and what he saw was something that the media wasn't reporting because the police weren't telling us, is that the police shot up basically the upper floor of his house. There were bullet holes everywhere, including in his teenage son's bedroom. So the lawyer realized, well, my client's being made out to be a monster in the media, but what they don't know is that the police fired. He fired, I think, maybe 2 or 3 shots, but the police fired dozens of shots, especially the bullet holes in the son's bedroom. So at the bail hearing, the defense lawyer surprised everyone and decided I'm not requesting a publication ban on the hearing. So a different portrait came out. That's why it's important to cover a bail hearing. And like just a side note about that case is Mr. Parasiris was acquitted. I think whoever asked about how the trial I covered today came out, well, he was acquitted of murder, and I'll tell you why. It's because, well, he was acquitted of murder. He was convicted of later of having an illegal firearm or discharging an illegal firearm. But this key thing that came out during the trial, and this is why it was important to be covering the entire trial, even the jury's deliberations. The Crown tried to present a case that the police officer, Daniel Tessier, was wearing a baseball cap with the word police in front, and that should have clearly told Mr. Parasiris that he was a police officer. There's a slight problem with the Crown's theory, though, and this might surprise you, it might shock you, but I'm convinced that the police planted evidence in this case, that they tried to they tried to frame. They tried to convict a guilty man. I mean, yes, he did shoot Daniel Tessier, but there's two key elements that were never addressed properly by the Crown. One is that the baseball cap, the Crown's claiming that Mr. Tessier was wearing a baseball cap. When it was found, the only place it was found was at the foot of the bed that Mr. Tessier's body was placed on after he died at a hospital. When the body was brought to the hospital, someone was told, "Go collect Mr. Tessier's belongings for as evidence." And the guy who collected the belongings said, "Yes, I recovered this blue baseball cap with the word police on it." What the Crown can never address was if the police officer Daniel Tessier was shot in the face. So, and there's a brim on a baseball cap, right? So the key question they couldn't answer is, if he was shot in the face and blood tends to splatter when you're shot, why is the brim of the baseball cap, there's not one stain, nothing, no trace of blood at all on the baseball cap? The other problem was, in the son's room where many of the shots were fired, they took photos of the aftermath of the shooting and how they tried to revive Daniel. Other police officers tried desperately to revive their partner, Daniel Tessier, and ambulance technicians came in later. So there's this big mess on the bedroom floor of Mr. Parasiris' son. And all the stuff on the floor could be accounted for except for a black toque. There was a black toque on the floor. It was there. It's in a photo, but it was never gathered as evidence. It never made it. It never made it to the laboratory to be tested for forensics. It never made it. So the big question is, what happened to that toque? And to me, it's obvious that was what Daniel Tessier was actually wearing, a black toque. And why I say it's important to cover even like a jury's deliberations. You're just waiting. You could end up waiting days for a decision to come out. Was that during the deliberations, the Crown prosecutor seemed to get nervous and said, "I can't understand why they're deliberate." She told the judge, "I can't understand why they're deliberating for so long. I think your instructions to the jury just confused them. I demand that you deliver your instructions your instructions again." This is a really good judge, an excellent judge. I don't think he's ever been turned over on appeal before or since. And he stopped being polite at that point. The jury wasn't there to hear this, but the judge said, "Do you want to know what I think they're arguing about?" And the prosecutor said, "Yes, please tell us. Tell everybody." And the judge held up the photo that I just told you about with the black toque in it. He said, "You know what they're arguing about? They're arguing, where the hell is this black toque?" And the prosecutor just shut her mouth, sat down, and did not say anything, which stunned me, because what she should have, if she believed in her case, she should have stood up and said, "Your Honor, you've just accused the police of getting rid of evidence, of tampering with evidence." She didn't say nothing. She sat down and took it. And then a couple of days later, Basil Parasiris was acquitted. But anyway, so I think I've answered the question on a bail hearing. The next stage is what's called a preliminary inquiry. That is where the Crown has had enough time, the dust has settled on the case, and the Crown has had enough time to sort out what its evidence is. And they can present it to a judge. And so not all the evidence, but certain parts of the evidence are presented to the judge. And the judge has to decide whether the person can go ahead and be tried on the charge they are accused of. So, like, let's say in Mr. Latham's case, initially, when he was arrested, they charged him with second-degree murder. A few months later, they upgraded it to first-degree murder. They felt, oh, this is a plan. We think he planned to rob Tommy Dugas, so that means there's premeditation, there's planning. So let's bump it up to first-degree murder, the most serious charge, the most serious offense you can be charged with in Canada. But they had the preliminary inquiry, and the judge decided, no, I don't see plan. Judge at that stage obviously said, I don't see planning, I don't see premeditation. Something happened on the spot. So that's why I'm bringing it back down to second-degree murder. But at a preliminary inquiry, it's basically automatic that a publication ban will be placed, because at that point, and that's where you really, really have to be careful at preliminary inquiry. You really shouldn't report anything, because that means it's very close to a trial stage. So if the accused wants to have a jury trial, you really should not be reporting at all what happens at a preliminary inquiry. Almost always it's put under a publication ban. It's very rare for it not to be. Even if, let's say, all along before the preliminary inquiry, let's say the accused has said, I don't want a trial before a jury. Juries are unpredictable. I'd rather have a trial before a judge alone. They can always change that option at any stage. So that's why it's always dangerous to report anything that happens at a preliminary inquiry. The next stage after that is the actual trial. So let's say if it's before a judge alone, there is. Sorry, I see a question.
Sorry, Paul, I was going to say you had a question from Stella, and then now there's one also in the chat.
Okay.
So Stella wants to ask it first, and then you could answer the one in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just a bit confused, I guess, about what happens at each stage. So the first thing is the initial arrest, right? Like the person's arrested, and then the accused gets formally charged. So they appear before a judge, and it's usually really quick. You said,
yeah.
It's a really quick thing. They're like, oh, these are your charges, and then they publish the charges, and then they have the bail hearing. But what comes out of the bail hearing?
A bail you mean for a reporter? What comes from a reporter's perspective?
What is decided in the bail hearing?
Okay. It's the everyone in Canada is innocent until proven guilty. So in an ideal situation, even if you're charged with a crime, you haven't been found guilty. So in an ideal world, you should be able to walk free, even though you're charged. That you should be able to be free. That's the starting point. I don't want to get confusing, but that's the starting point of everywhere. Is that you're a free person living in a free country, even though you're charged with a crime, you haven't been proven guilty. Therefore, you should be able to, in an ideal situation, be allowed to go free, meet with your lawyer anytime you want, and be able to defend yourself. See, being put in a jail while you're charged, your ability to defend yourself is hampered. You can't meet with your lawyer whenever you want. It's tough to get access to a computer in a jail cell. In a jail, it's a lot tougher. But if it's there's what's called 3 criteria that the Crown has to meet. Yeah, one of 3 criteria that the Crown has to meet to have an accused stay in jail while he's charged. One is that that he's a risk. The person is a risk of fleeing, that they won't show up in court when they're supposed to. That's one reason. If the Crown can prove they're likely to flee, then yes, a judge will usually order that they have to remain detained. The other criteria is that they represent a danger to the public. Let's say the example I gave you of someone robbing a bank. Let's say the guy went into the bank with a loaded gun, started to fire away. He aimed at some tellers, missed them, but almost he tried to kill them. Bullets hit everywhere, and he threatened to kill everybody in the bank. Then the Crown can argue at a bail hearing, this person poses a threat to society. There's a security risk if we release this person. And let's say the person has a long criminal record. They can also use that. They go, look, this is the 10th time this guy's been in court in the past 3 years. This is getting insane. We have to keep him detained while he awaits a trial. The last criteria is where the media comes in. The phrase they use is that if a person who's well informed of the case, so it's hypothetically, if a person was well informed of the case, if they knew the details of the case, and they learned that the person was released while charged, well, that person, the average, intelligent, well-informed person in Canada would lose faith in the justice system if that person was charged. So those are the three criteria that the Crown has to meet. To do that, the Crown will present not a lot of evidence, the key parts of the evidence. They'll usually have a couple of witnesses testify, and the judge can base if the Crown presents that evidence and shows that they have a strong case. That's one of the reasons why a judge can order that someone be denied bail. Why it's good for a reporter to show up for a bail hearing, even though it's very likely to have a publication ban placed on it, is it'll help if you work in a newsroom where just a sec. Sorry, my throat was getting dry. If you work in a newsroom where people plan things ahead, let's say this was a big crime. This was a serious crime. We want to cover this all the way till the trial. The bail hearing is where you basically decide whether it's worth covering that trial or not, because you get most of the key evidence. So, if I cover, so let's say if it's a mafia murder, one mafia group kills a rival guy. That always is a very popular story for us. If you go to the bail hearing and you find out all the details of the why they killed this guy, you can't report it right away, but boy, this is down the road. When this comes out, this is going to be really good. To give you an example, there was a mafia conflict in Montreal, and about 10 years ago, someone tried to kill one of the biggest guys in the mafia, a guy named Reynald Desjardins. So he replied. He plotted to kill a mafioso who came from New York and tried to take over the mafia here in Montreal. The guy was killed. The guy from New York was killed. Unfortunately for the guy, Reynald Desjardins, the RCMP already had a drug trafficking investigation ongoing on him and his network, drug trafficking network. The RCMP was intercepting all of their text messages. Now, text messages can be nebulous and cryptic when you're an outsider and you're reading them. What they eventually realized is what these guys were texting back and forth to each other over BlackBerry. The guys thought they were doing this over encrypted BlackBerries. What they realized what they were doing was plotting the murder of this guy from New York. It was all there in the text messages. So it was the 6 or 7 guys were charged, including Reynald Desjardins. And when it got to the bail hearing stage, it was only myself and 2 other reporters who went, because everyone else said, "Well, why cover the bail? Why cover the bail hearing? Everything's going to be put under a publication ban." But tons of evidence came out from that bail hearing, including all the text messages. So what myself and two other reporters from La Presse and the Journal de Montréal did, we're experienced reporters at covering organized crime. We're very intrigued with this stuff. We had to make a special request before the judge. We had to have a lawyer come and represent us to make the request, but we requested that we get all copies of the evidence that was presented, with the understanding that we could not report on it until Mr. Desjardins, Reynald Desjardins' case was over. So when he eventually pled guilty, I had 6 stories ready when he pleaded guilty that showed that all emerged from the evidence. You have another question?
Yeah, so basically, like, at the bail hearing, they just decide whether this person's gonna be locked up until the trial or not?
That's right.
Okay, so like between when they are formally charged in court, that happens in court, right?
That's right.
And the bail hearing, like, how long is it usually between those two times?
By law, it's supposed to be as short as possible. I think ideally it's supposed to be no more than 3 days.
Okay, so it's pretty quick.
Yeah, but
okay.
Let's say with Reynald Desjardins, he didn't really mind if his bail hearing was delayed for a month or two, because he's used to the system, you know.
Are the people like locked up between when they're formally charged in the bail hearing?
Yes. Yeah.
So they're always like in custody in that period?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
So they're held in custody till the bail hearing.
That's right.
Okay.
They're detained. They're not incarcerated, they're detained.
Okay.
It's polite.
And then yeah. Okay. And then when the bail hearing happens, they find out if they're going to be allowed to be like around in public until the trial or not.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll address I'll read the question in the chat. Let's see. Was it possible for the defense to continue the case? From the question from Maria, it's a good one. The defense can't like accuse the police of wrongdoing, but they couldn't in this situation. They couldn't accuse it, but this was a very good lawyer, and I'll give you a personal example of what happened. When that first witness testified, he said, you know, the guy who gathered the evidence and who collected the baseball cap at Daniel Tessier's deathbed, he described all this stuff that he picked up. And I'll never forget it, because my boss had told me, my assignment editor told me, you know, we don't want a boring, dry story, a list of what this guy found on the hospital bed. I want you to take it and create a narrative, turn it into a narrative, tell a story. So I took I assumed that this cop was telling the truth. He was telling the truth, but that this was the real evidence. I took what he described gathering, and that was basically my first 3 paragraphs. This is, you know, when Daniel Tessier stormed inside the house, he was wearing this, and that. The following day, the defense lawyer is like one of the best defense lawyers in Quebec. And he walked out. He's famous for not talking to reporters at all. His name's Jacques La Rochelle. But he knew me previously, and he walked over to me and he said, Paul, you're Paul Cherry, right, with the Montreal Gazette? Yes. He said, you wrote that story this morning? I said, yes. He goes, you know, the story that's full of errors? And I go, what do you mean? He said, why did you say that Daniel Tessier was wearing that baseball cap? I said, well, that's what they found. He goes, okay, I see what you mean, and I see now the mountain I have to climb. He goes, Mr. Cherry, watch that baseball cap. Watch what happens with it during this trial. Watch carefully. That's when I realized, whoa, he's making a case that they tampered with evidence. So while he couldn't accuse the Laval police of tampering with evidence, he didn't have any proof of it. What he did was he challenged every time either the baseball cap or the toque came up, he highlighted that for the jury. You know, he said, so he showed the photo to the jury and said, and he'll have a witness on the stand. He said, and he'll say to the witness, so this black toque, what happened to it? Why wasn't it? You're the forensics expert. How come you weren't given this black toque to work with? let's say, and in that case, the witness, let's say a forensics expert, will say, "Well, I was never given that black toque. I never saw it." That's where the intrigue is created. That's where the defense can make the point, look, something very fishy happened here. I hope that answers your question, Maria. So going back to the what I was talking about before, when a case hits the trial stage. Oh, wait, you have another question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one more question about the publication ban at bail hearings. Why do they, like, why would they ban it at the bail hearing stage, but then like make it able to be reported on later on?
Because
Is it just for the jury?
it's just, yeah, to not
Okay,
potentially,
okay.
yeah, to not potentially influence a jury.
But then, like, okay. But then once the jury is in their deliberations, then you can report all that because they're like sequestered and it's fine.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
That's usually,
so, like,
it's good. Go ahead.
So like most of the time there's a ban at the bail hearing stage?
Most of the time.
Okay. But
It's
you can
usually,
like before the bail hearing, you can report the charges?
yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
At all points you can
Okay.
report charges. Yeah.
But you just can't give details about like evidence or anything because of the jury.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So let's say like the bail hearing that I referred to, the Reynald Desjardins bail hearing, there was never a trial. Reynald Desjardins never had a trial. He just pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of conspiracy to commit murder. And they'll have to do, the Crown will summarize the case, or the defense will summarize the case when a person pleads guilty, but they won't reveal much details. So usually, like a reporter coming in fresh for the, let's say if you got a tip, Reynald Desjardins is going to plead guilty today. It's going to be a big thing. People show up, but then they're confronted with a 5-minute hearing where not much was said, and they're left scratching their head. Wow, this was supposed to be a big deal, and nothing really was said. No details came out of it. That's actually what happened in Reynald Desjardins' case. But we had done myself and the two other reporters had done all our work to get all that evidence, and we had stories prepared. So as soon as he pleaded guilty, we texted the people running our websites and our newsrooms. As soon as he pleaded guilty, those stories were coming up. So any reporter who went in fresh and didn't know what was going on was suddenly caught off guard and realized we had, to use a lack of a better term, we had kicked everybody's asses by being able to publish those stories. That's why, to me, it's important to always be there at a bail hearing. So there's I believe another question from Maria. The question from Maria is whether someone else could have given the forensic guy the toque. See, the theory is it's never, no one ever really came out and accused the Laval police or the Sûreté du Québec of doing this. But what it looked like was someone, my theory is, from covering the trial, my theory is that someone walked in, maybe a homicide investigator walked in and asked someone else, another police officer, what the hell was he wearing when he went in? And someone must have said, well, look, that black toque that's lying on this kid's floor, that's what he was wearing. I think someone realized this doesn't look good and got rid of the toque, destroyed it, got rid of it, hid it, whatever. Maybe it's still in Mr. Paris, buried in Mr. Paris's backyard. So to me, someone got rid of the toque and then said, well, not only that, it's not good enough. Let's plant something that shows that he was clearly identified as a police officer. Does anyone have a baseball cap? Does anyone have a baseball cap? Someone probably popped out this brand new baseball cap, probably sitting in a trunk or something, or in a van, a SWAT team's van, and they just planted it at the foot of his bed in the hospital. That's my theory. This is never, no one's ever put it out in a plain detail like that. But to me, that's basically what happened. To me, the someone got rid of that black toque, so they would never find the police officer's DNA on it because someone got rid of it. I hope that answers your question, Maria.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. It's good. It's good. It's a good question because a lot of people were puzzled because I wrote a story, basically presenting that narrative that with that key question that the judge, even the judge at one point said, basically alleged that someone tampered with evidence. He did it subtly, but it was out there, and I did it while the jury was deliberating. And what I couldn't believe was the other reporters who covered the case were going, "Wow, where did you get that from? Where did that come from?" And I was like, "Well, if you followed the trial carefully, I mean, I had the defense lawyer's instructions, follow the cap carefully." And that judge, when that judge said it, a judge who I respect immensely, when he said it, a light bulb went off in my head. Oh my God, I'm not. It's not just me who thinks that the police tamper with evidence. Clearly, the judge believes it too, which is a very serious situation. I mean, but it really wasn't addressed much after the case. Media highlighted how they say how he got off with it, but I believe it. I hate to use old references for such young people, but there was a famous trial called the O.J. Simpson trial. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's one of the most famous murder cases in America. And 10 years later, after O.J. Simpson, he was a star football player and kind of a movie star. That's why it was such a big case. 10 years later, PBS did a look back on the trial and why he got acquitted. And this phrase that came out of the because there was evidence that the LAPD had planted evidence in the case. So they asked all the key people in the trial, why do you think he was acquitted? And the answer that I believe and respect was, the problem was they tried to frame a guilty man. So you've got evidence, you're convinced that yes, this person did commit the crime. In that case, it was O.J. Simpson, that whether or not he killed his wife. There's a lot of evidence to suggest he did it. But when you learn that the police tampered with evidence or planted evidence, that creates what the legal term is reasonable doubt. I'm glad I'm able to bring this up. That's a term you're going to hear a lot if you cover courts, reasonable doubt. The Crown in Canada has the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone committed a crime. That's the thing. It can't be a frivolous doubt. That's how judges define it. It has to be a reasonable doubt that someone committed a crime. So if you enter into the portrait that something happened with the evidence, they right away, boom, there's reasonable doubt for you. So that, to me, that's what happened in O.J. Simpson, and to me, that's what happened in the Basil Parasiris case. And just a little side note, I wrote 2 stories while the jury was deliberating. One was that the possibility that evidence was tampered with, but I also wrote, because the jury never got to hear why the police were there in the first place. All this evidence of him being involved in the drug trafficking ring was not allowed to be presented during the trial, because the judge just wanted the trial to be about the homicide, the murder, the killing of Daniel Tessier. So the jury never really heard why the police were there in the first place. So when the jury was sequestered, I was able to do a whole story of why they did this. And it revealed, basically the story revealed that the very likelihood that Mr. Tessier that Mr. Parasiris was involved in the drug trafficking that his nephew was doing. Why I'm talking about this now is because everyone wanted to interview Basil Parasiris after he was acquitted, and he turned down every media. When he walked out of the courthouse and he was acquitted, he gave no comment. He refused. Some reporters tried to cozy up to him during the jury's deliberation because he was out on bail. They tried to cozy up to him for an interview. He said no. It was the day after the It was a Saturday. I wasn't working that day. I had the weekend off after the trial. And one of our reporters was asked to call Parasiris again, just to see if maybe he's willing to speak. So it was the first real attempt for the Montreal Gazette to interview Basil Parasiris. So the reporter called, introduced himself. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm with the Montreal Gazette. And the funny thing is that Basil Parasiris said, the last people I want to talk to is someone who's friends with, who's buddies with Paul Cherry. He was obviously upset at the story I did that showed that he was probably involved in drug trafficking. It was not too flattering. But the reporter was very experienced, and he and I used to sit next to each other in the office. We weren't close friends, but we were friends. He said he knew how to get Parasiris talking, and he just said, "Oh, I'm not buddies with Paul Cherry," and then Parasiris went off and started talking for about at least a half an hour to this reporter after him just saying, "I'm not Paul Cherry's buddy." He went off and talked for half an hour, and we were the Montreal Gazette was the only media to get an interview with Parasiris. So I thought that would be an interesting side note that you can put in comments in the chat if you didn't find that interesting. So I want to get back to trials and whether the question from the young woman about in yellow, I can't remember her name right now, about publication bans. Even now in trials, ideally in a trial, they're not supposed to be any publication bans. Like, especially a jury trial, it's supposed to be like the most public, I want to use the right way, public airing of evidence that there should be in Canada, because usually when the crime happens, police are much more and more reluctant to give details at a crime scene. They're worried that they might say something wrong and that'll be used later in court. So they don't give us much. Then you have the publication bans put at the bail hearing and the preliminary inquiry. So you have to believe that a criminal trial, especially before a jury, that it's the most public form of justice that exists in Canada. Unfortunately, to give you a reality check, a lot of prosecutors now are noticing that reporters aren't covering courts as much. Newsrooms, I'm sure you've heard it all before. Newsrooms are shrinking. There's only so many reporters that one media or another can devote to covering a court case. So prosecutors are noticing that reporters are covering stuff less and less, and they're getting more and more bold in requesting publication bans because they know there's no one there to challenge them. There's no reporter in the room to say, "Hey, wait a minute, this is supposed to be public." And in the good old days, I hate to use the expression, but in the good old days, let's say as recently as 10, maybe even 5 years ago, let's say if there's 5 of us covering a trial, and a prosecutor says, "Well, we want to put a publication ban on something," it's becoming ridiculous. There's a trial going on right now at the Montreal courthouse. It's before a jury. It's an attempted murder trial, and they want to put a publication ban on the victim's name. They feel that they weren't sure whether the victim would testify or not. And that's why they requested the ban. They thought if there's a publication ban on his name, then the guy is more likely to come and testify about what happened to him. But the thing is, this is someone who's been attempted. Other people have tried to kill this guy in the past. He's got a criminal record. Anyone who wants to kill this guy knows who he is and knows where to find him because of his past. And to put a publication ban to me is nonsense, and it makes covering a trial much more difficult, because if you can't say who the victim is, then honestly, what's the point? Who cares? Because the big question behind any trial is why, the motive. Why? People always want to know that why. And in this case, we can't name the victim. La Presse began covering the trial, but stopped because they found it frustrating, the publication ban. They found the judge was very unfair, very unwilling to listen to the media's reasons for not wanting the publication ban. So La Presse basically stopped covering it. And like, I know one of the prosecutors in the case, and he joked with me in the corridor and said, "Hey, how come you're not covering the attempted murder trial?" And basically I said, because with all the publication bans that are on it, there's no point. There's no reason to cover it. So this is what's happening now in a lot of trials at the Montreal courthouse. A lot of publications bans are being placed on stuff, even if it's in a jury trial. It's something to watch out for. To me, I'll tell you about the turning point. It's something that I think maybe you guys can more relate to. There's a case, I think it's still ongoing, where a guy he was trolling the sister of a very famous tennis player from Montreal. I can't remember her name right now. She's a very famous. She likes to post a lot of stuff on Twitter, on Instagram. She's often in Sports Illustrated. She's also a bikini model, and her sister does the same thing. Likes to tweet photos of herself, photos of her modeling, photos of her wearing bikinis and stuff like that. And some guy started trolling her, and he basically, I guess he's obsessed with her, and he made, I believe he made threats to her, and the tennis player's sister gave an interview to La Presse the day before this guy was supposed to have a court hearing, a day in his trial. She testified at length, and the next day, the prosecutor obviously had not seen the article in La Presse, and he said, "Oh, wait, before everything gets started." And there's by now, because a lot of people had, that's it, Eugenie Bouchard, thank you. Eugenie Bouchard's sister was the one who was threatened. The prosecutor in the case, thank you very much for that, Angelique. The prosecutor said, "Wait, before we do anything, I want to put a publication ban on the victim's name. She suffered enough. She's been trolled, and we have to have a publication ban put on this." And all the reporters who were there, because of the interview that she had given the day before, we're all looking around going, "This is insane. If we can't say who the victim is, then there's no story." Absolutely not. Who cares? If you can't say who's being trolled on Instagram, then really who cares? What's the point of covering the case? So I was the most experienced reporter there. Everyone looked to me. It wasn't a situation where we could get a media lawyer there right away. So I had to get up and argue. I have experience. I'm not a lawyer by any means. I really shouldn't be getting up and arguing, but I've done it before. You get used to it after a while. It's not that intimidating, but I got up and I said, "Your Honor, this makes no sense," to the judge who was requested to impose the pub ban. I said, "Your Honor, this makes absolutely no sense because the victim gave an interview. It's on La Presse's website right now. It's in today's paper. She obviously has no fear of her name getting out there. So I don't understand why there should be a publication ban." And long story short, the judge ultimately agreed with me, and the judge actually pointed out to the prosecutor, said, "You should have checked first. You should have asked the victim if she wanted a publication ban put on her name or not, because your request is quite frivolous." So these are the situations that you come up with. You have to face when you have a lot of experience, especially when you're the old guy in the room and everyone looks to you to figure things out. Let me just go over my notes. Sorry, does anyone else have any questions at this point?
Yeah, so after, so at the preliminary inquiry, they'll determine whether there's enough evidence to send the matter to trial, right?
That's right.
If there isn't, is the person acquitted? Is that when it happens?
That can happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How
Usually
long?
what
go
a judge does, sorry, Stella. Usually what happens at that stage is the judge will says, I don't find enough evidence for this to go to trial. They'll turn to the prosecution and go, what do you make of that, of my decision? Usually a prosecutor will say, we got to take a few days, but usually what happens is eventually, either on the spot or eventually they'll say, we have no reason to further prosecute this case. Therefore, we ask that you put what's called a stay of proceedings on the charges. That means the person technically remains charged for a year. If the prosecution finds any other evidence or more additional evidence, then they can add it in, and then the case can basically restart. But that very rarely happens. Basically, what happens is there's a stay of proceedings, and then the trial dies. The case dies. You had another question.
Is there publication bans at that stage? Like, if the person is acquitted, are you allowed? I assume you're allowed to report that.
Excellent question, and I'll give you two answers to that, because these comes up. Even the most experienced reporters ask that question, and others like it. Yes, it happened. I mean, whatever happened. I mean, someone was charged. Let's give the example of the bank robber. He was arrested. He was accused of it. That happened. Maybe there wasn't enough evidence to prove that he did it. So in the future, you would have to carefully report that there wasn't enough evidence even to have him go to a trial. But it did happen. That doesn't mean you can't report on it. But I'm glad you asked that question, because it was something I wanted to talk about, because it brings up another issue. It's what's called an absolute discharge. I'm sure some of the people here know there's a trial going on of a man named Gilbert Rozon, the founder of the Just for Laughs festival. He's charged with sexually assaulting a woman in a case that dates back to 1979 or 1980. The woman isn't sure on when it happened. This case emerged from the Me Too movement, where a lot of women who worked with Gilbert Rozon alleged that he used his power in the entertainment industry to either sexually assault them or sexually abuse them, or sexually harass them, I should say. And many of them filed complaints with the police. They were all investigated. About a dozen cases were investigated, and only one case emerged out of this. The case that's going on. The verdict's coming, I think, December 18th. Why I'm bringing this up is in the 1998, Gilbert Rozon was convicted of sexually assaulting a woman who worked as a croupier. They had like a little mini casino party going on in a hotel to celebrate the success of the Just for Laughs festival that year. And he sexually assaulted a woman who was working at the party. He pleaded guilty, and because it was the first time he was ever charged with a crime, let alone sexual assault, the judge later agreed with a request that he received an absolute discharge. Basically, the sentence is if you follow certain conditions for a period of time, usually a year or two, it's like being on probation. If you follow these conditions successfully and you don't violate any of them, then the criminal record evaporates. It doesn't exist. See, that's important to a guy like Rozon, because when he goes to the border, when he goes to tries to travel to the U.S. or to Europe as part of his business, that criminal record's gone then, technically. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. And one of the most, I found it, I thought it was absurd at the time, but I'll get to your question. I see your hand. One of the most, a guy with 10 times more experience than I, not in courts, but as a reporter. He was writing a column at that point. After he got his absolute discharge, it upset a lot of people and a lot of things were being said. He had to write a column later on. And he came up to me, asked me kind of sheepishly, he said, since he has that absolute discharge, does that mean I can't report on it anymore? Does that mean it? No, that's absurd. It happened. It really happened. He was convicted of sexual assault. He admitted that it happened. So you can report on it. It's fact. It's history. So it's out there, and you can report on it. That's the short answer to short version of the answer. You have another question, Stella?
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. So like anything that happened, you can totally report on it, even if like now because of the absolute discharge, those documents like don't exist anymore.
I'll let you guys in on a little secret. Their records are supposed to be destroyed. For whatever reason, I don't know, but I often get lucky, and the record is still there sometimes. There was a case not so long ago. A man hydro work. It was in Côte Saint Luc, sorry, in either Côte des Neiges or Côte Saint Luc. A man didn't want Hydro Quebec to go onto his property. He was an elderly man. They thought just a grumpy old guy. He didn't want Hydro to go on his property. The Hydro workers were saying, we have right of way. We have the right to go on. They should knock on your door and ask politely, but they didn't. They just went in his backyard. He got upset. So he was so upset that the Hydro workers called the Montreal police. The Montreal police show up, and he's out of control. He's raging. He won't calm down. Obviously has a mental health problem. So they don't want to shoot him. So they used a rubber bullet, thing that projects a rubber bullet. It hits the man square in the chest and knocks him unconscious. He's sent to the hospital with chest problems. It was a big case. It was a big. This was a big story when it happened, and so I started to research the background of the man in court. Everyone was going to the crime scene and trying to talk to neighbors to find out more about this man. Everyone was saying he's a nice man. He's an old guy. They should have left him alone. I researched it, and I found he had a criminal record. So what on earth could this guy? And it was a recent criminal. And this is a guy in his late 70s or early 80s. What on earth could this guy be charged with? So I checked, and the funny thing was it wasn't an actual crime. It was how he had breached the conditions of a previous sentence that wasn't available in the criminal records. It's in Quebec they call it the plumitif. It's something that's publicly accessible at the courthouse. At the Gazette, we have access to a service that we can see a criminal record as long as it's provincial. That costs us a lot of money. The one available at the courthouse is free. But anyway, I saw that he had a criminal record. So I went up, I ran to the criminal clerk's office and I said, can you pull this file for me? And they did. So I looked at the file. He breached the condition in another file that didn't exist in the plumitif. And I was intrigued that was the crack in the cement for me, that the reference to the previous case. So I went, wow, I didn't see that on the plumitif. I must have made a mistake. So I went back to the clerk's office and I said, can I have this case, this other case? Oh yeah, sure. Just a slow day at the courthouse. The clerk was happy to help me. Opens up the case. And I see he obstructed a police officer. That was the case. So, whoa, this guy has a history with the police. This is intriguing. This guy who was acting crazy with the police has a history with the cops. The plot thickens. Wow. So I said, okay. Now this is where it gets a little, a miracle happened. You can also you can place an order for court recordings, like everything said in a Montreal courthouse at the Palais de Justice de Montréal is recorded in a courtroom. And as long as it doesn't date too far back, you can request a recording of it. Even reporters, we have to pay for it. It costs a lot of money, but you can get it. And I made my request. By then, I'd known the people in the recording room so well that I filled out my form in 5 minutes, handed it to the guy in charge of handling these requests. He went over to his desk himself and he made me the recording on the spot of when this guy was pleaded guilty to obstructing the police. Again, another crack in the cement. then, so he had received an absolute discharge of having harassed, of having this conflict with the police. But I was able to find it because they never threw away the old record, the paper record. They never threw it away. So there it was. I got lucky. It doesn't always happen, but it does happen. And I listened to the recording. This is where the story blew wide open. He had confronted the police because they walked into his house with a search warrant, a valid search warrant, and informed him they were there to investigate his son for possessing and distributing child porn. His son had done this inside the guy's house, and he obviously did not know it. So he was shocked to find out that his son had done this, his adult grown-up son had done this, didn't believe it, and confronted the police and got into a tussle with one of the cops. So I had all this the day after this guy was sent to the hospital. And while most reporters were out on the scene talking to neighbors and family, or trying to talk to family, by noon, I had the whole story behind why this guy hates the cops on our webpage. The funny thing was that a lawyer representing the family is kind of an older lawyer, kind of very old school lawyer. He saw the story. He knew me well. We always got along in the past, but he was furious. He said, "Paul, you can't report that. You're not allowed to report that." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because the father got an absolute discharge. I'm the one who got him the absolute discharge. There's no way you can report on that." And I said, "Well, I found the information. It happened. I'm allowed to report that it happened." And he said, no. And he started to cite law, and he said, the family is going to sue you. I'm telling you right now, the family is going to sue you. It was a confrontational thing, but to me, I knew he was just being sometimes defense lawyers have to be bullies, and I knew I was being bullied. So I just said, all I said was, "Well, look, now that you've threatened me with a lawsuit, this is a business call. This isn't a friendly call. So you got to call our lawyer. If you want to talk to me any further, I'm sorry, but you got to talk to our lawyer since you're threatening me with a lawsuit." So the lawyer called our lawyer, the Gazette's lawyer, who's one of the best, most experienced in media law in all of Canada. He's a great lawyer, Mark Banty. That lawyer called up our lawyer, Mark Banty, and he said, "Mr. Cherry put a story on the website. It's illegal. He's breaking the law. We can sue you guys. We're gonna sue your asses off." He said, "What are you going to base the lawsuit on? It happened. If Paul's being factual and reporting the facts, it happened. Why can't it? Because there's this law that says you can't report on something that happened in an absolute discharge." And our lawyer, Mark Fancy, said, "Are you referring to this precedent that was set like in the 1970s?" And the lawyer said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm referring to." And our lawyer, Mark Banty, was able to give him 6 other precedents after that 1970s decision that went in the other way, that said, no, if something really happened and you have the facts, of course you could report on it. And then the classic line was, the lawyer for the family told our lawyer, Mark Banty, he said, "Mark, you're worth every penny the Gazette is paying you." And he hung up. Sorry, that was a long story to answer your question, eh?
No, it's that's good. Is the absolute discharge and an acquittal, are they the same thing? Like
No.
once you know?
No, let me give you another example.
Okay.
Another example from my boring life. If these stories are too long and detailed, just let me know. But I find when I was at Concordia, the things I remember the most were the personal stories that teachers told me. That helped me get out of jams often, and get me through situations when I was actually working as a reporter. I'll give you a classic. There was a long time ago. There was a prime minister named Brian Mulroney. His administration was found to be quite corrupt. A lot of people in his administration were charged with crimes, including a very important person whose name fails me right now. The Gazette back in the 1990s went hard on that story. They really invested. We did a lot of investigative stories, especially on this key man. I'm sorry that his name fails me. I don't even remember his position, but he had a very important position in the Mulroney government. It was one of the rare people who actually went to a full trial. He had a full trial. He was convicted of corruption, breach. It's called breach of conduct, I believe. Anyway, it's a corruption charge. he was convicted of it, and he asked, when he was sentenced, he asked for an absolute discharge because he said, I'm besides working in the government, I used to be a businessman. When I'm not part of the government anymore, I'm going to be a businessman. I need to travel. I need to travel to Europe. I need to travel to America. I can't travel to those places with a criminal record. I'd like to have an absolute discharge. The trial judge who convicted him decided, no. This is a serious crime. It has to be denounced. People have to know that there's consequences to a crime like this. So the judge said, no, you're going to be left with a criminal record. The man appealed, and he appealed just his sentence, not the conviction. And he was eventually granted an absolute discharge by the Quebec Court of Appeal. So this big, long decision comes out. It's like 50 pages. Quebec Court of Appeal likes to write out every detail of their thinking. They come out with this decision that says, no, he's not a violent criminal. He's never posed a threat to society in terms of dangerousness. So we're going to grant him the absolute discharge. This, back then, you had to go to the courthouse and get a paper copy of it. So we went over to the Quebec Court of Appeal. Someone went over to the Quebec Court of Appeal, got the decision, came back very late in the day. They handed it to a rookie reporter and someone said, I don't blame the reporter for this, because an experienced assignment editor should have explained the situation better. All the assignment editor said was, here, read this decision. I don't get it. Read this decision and write a 15-inch story on it. So this poor, and it was in French too. So you have terms that are like, instead of absolute discharge, you have an absolution, which sounds a lot more like an acquittal than absolute discharge, I have to admit. So this poor reporter combs through this 50-page decision at 6 o'clock in the evening. His deadline probably back then was 10 o'clock. The way he read it was, oh, this guy was acquitted. So he wrote the whole story based on the assumption that he had been acquitted. The very next day, this is before websites, the very next day, there it is in black and white on page 3 of the Gazette, so-and-so acquitted of corruption. And the two reporters at the Gazette who had done all that investigation and who had worked so hard on covering the trial and stuff like that, they thought they were in disbelief. And they read the story and they said, what? And then they got copies of the Quebec Court of Appeals decision, said, no, he's not acquitted. It's an absolute discharge. That's his sentence. His sentence is that eventually he is absolutely discharged of the crime he was accused of. It doesn't mean he's still convicted, but the sentence, basically the case can disappear. So the next night I was working a late shift, and guess who got that dumped? No, I wasn't working a late shift. I was working a regular shift. But guess who had to write? I had to basically, it's my famous story. I had to write I like to call it my 15-inch correction of the original story. I had to write a story that explained how we made the mistake, and arguing that they should have a better term than absolution in French, and explaining that, no, this guy still was convicted of this crime. So that's the thing. They are convicted, but the absolute discharge, basically it wipes away the key. Most times the reason why a person asks for an absolute discharge is this key moment. You show up at the border, they punch your name into a database. If you've got a criminal record, usually that border guard is going to start asking questions. If you have an absolute discharge, after 2 years, that thing disappears. So when the border guard punches in your name, nothing shows up.
So like an absolute discharge is like, yes, you still did this crime, but we'll wipe it away after a certain amount of time. Whereas like an acquittal is like, it's over immediately.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless the Crown doesn't believe in the acquittal and appeals.
Okay. And then like the appeal would be for an absolute discharge? Or like the appeal would be like to continue looking into the case.
usually the Crown will ask for a new trial. Like if let's say if
Okay.
there's an acquittal and the Crown doesn't believe it, thinks the judge made a big mistake, or a jury makes a mistake, they'll go and ask for let's do this trial over again. It happens. It happens more often than you think.
So there can be a jury at a preliminary inquiry?
No.
Oh,
That's
no.
just
No, okay, that's what I thought.
good.
So that's
Good question. That's just before a judge alone. They'll usually have Stella. They'll usually have 2 or 3 key witnesses will testify at length. It's the key people in the trial who are going to testify in the case and who are likely to testify later in the trial. They'll present that, and a judge has to weigh. Like, let's say in Mr. Latham's case, the key thing is it first degree murder? If he was going to be convicted of first degree murder, he automatically receives a life sentence, and his parole, he has to serve at least 25 years before he's eligible for parole. It's automatic. There's no question about it. If it's second degree murder, that means there was less. It wasn't necessarily planned or premeditated. It's not that cold-blooded. So again, life sentence, but you're eligible for parole. The minimum you have to serve before you're eligible for parole is 10 years. Manslaughter, it can range anywhere from 4 years, like, because in Mr. Latham's case, the minimum sentence he'll probably have to serve is 4 years. The life sentence is not automatic at all. It can be anywhere from a minimum of 4 years to the maximum is a life sentence, but it's very rare that you see a life sentence in a manslaughter case. So in this case, the reason why I'm using Latham as an example is because initially he's arrested, he's charged. He tried to hide after Dugas was killed. He tried to hide out in Ontario. They arrest him right away. First day of the case, he's charged with second degree murder. So to me, as an experienced reporter, I see, oh, okay, even the Crown doesn't think that this was planned and premeditated. So it's not that serious. So that's day one. They don't even have it's kind of rare that you have a bail hearing in a murder case, especially a first degree murder case. So I don't even think he asked for bail. But in a murder case, you also have to wait until it goes to Superior Court. Initially, you're charged in Quebec Court, and you have to wait until it goes to Superior Court to have a bail hearing in a murder case. I know that sounds like a boring formality, but it's something you guys should know, because often reporters will say, assume that the next court date is a bail hearing in a murder case. Well, it's not. You have to wait a while before it gets transferred it gets bumped up to Superior Court. Anyway, focus, Paul, focus. Several weeks after he was arrested, as I mentioned before, for some reason, the Crown bumped it up to first degree murder. Obviously, they thought, no, this guy, I think it was a planned robbery, so let's put it up to first degree. So at the preliminary inquiry stage, the judge heard all the evidence and said, no, this wasn't planned and premeditated. There's no evidence that this was planned and premeditated. So he bumped it back down to second degree murder. That was the key there for preliminary inquiry. He heard the evidence. The judge heard the evidence and decided, no, you can't put him on trial for the most serious crime in Canada. Someone here, there's another question in chat, sorry. So an acquittal makes the case over. Yes, I already answered that question. I think I'm gonna talk about does anyone else have any more questions?
I just have a question. What's the difference between an absolute discharge and a pardon?
A pardon. Another good question. That's the stage that I haven't referred to. An absolute discharge happens all in court. It's an absolute discharge is part of the sentence, or it is a sentence. That happens in court. A judge decides it. A pardon happens after. I don't know what the time delay is, but it happens after. If a person has been it could be actually a very serious crime. I've seen there people have been convicted of sexual assault have actually obtained pardons. If after a certain period of time you haven't committed any other crimes, you can go to, and you do this through the National Parole Board, no matter what your case is, even if you did no time in jail and you never got parole before, you apply to the National Parole Board for a pardon. It's very procedural. I don't know what the steps it takes, but someone weighs your case. I don't know if it's a judge. I don't think it's a judge. Besides, it's a very administrative thing as opposed to an absolute discharge, which happens in a court of law. You apply for this thing, you apply for a pardon, and someone looks over your file, and if they feel you don't pose a threat to society, and you want to get on with your life, and you're tired of in modern times you're tired of people. Every time you apply for a job, someone Googles your name and sees an old article about what you did. They'll say, you want to get on with your life, so we'll give you a pardon. It happens in a minute. The best way to explain it in a short way is it happens in an administrative way, whereas a absolute discharge is a judge who's heard all the facts, who's gone through the emotion of your trial, and yet still decides you merit having an absolute discharge. I hope that answers your question. I hope I wasn't getting too confusing.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Okay, anyone else have a question? No? Maybe I want to explain to you why I feel I'm able to cover courts. It's what's been proven to me now. What I realize now is that it's not for everybody. A lot, especially new reporters, they're not only they're intimidated, they don't. I've had reporters tell me, I don't want to cover it. I don't want to cover a sexual assault trial. I don't want to hear that. It's horrible. I just don't want to go through it. So only a certain type of person is built to put up with this stuff. I've had to cover hard trials. I covered a trial that was the murder of a woman who murdered her boyfriend's son. Not only that, she beat him up over a period of days, put him through hell. So this very four-year-old boy suffered through hell for 5 days before she crushed his skull and killed him. She basically resented having to look after him while the boy's father was away doing. He had allowed himself to be used as in a test for medication, so he was away for a week or two and couldn't have any contact with his family. It was a horrific trial. My son at the time was 4 years old, so I knew exactly how fragile that boy was, how vulnerable that boy was as this was happening. It was very, very difficult to follow. So I know that it is tough to hear some of this evidence, but you have to do it. It's your job. So I think people have often asked me, well, they flipped the coin on me and said, well, how are you able to cover that? Why are you able to cover that? And to me, it's a good question. I often look back and wonder why am I able to cover some of these horrible things? And I'll give you what I've come to believe is the reason why. Back in 1996, when I was still at Concordia, I got a summer internship at the Sherbrooke Record. After hearing for several people who were out working like me now, people who worked at the Gazette or other media were coming into our classes and lecturing us, and they would always put this side note saying, there are no jobs out there, no one's hiring, you might want to consider switching your major. It's not, no one's hiring, it's really terrible out there. I didn't listen to any of that. To me, journalism's a very individual thing. It's not, we're not working in a car factory. So it's not part of some movement. If an individual really wants to be work as a journalist, they're really interested in, if they really love it, eventually they will find a job. I'm convinced of that. But anyway, I got an internship at the Sherbrooke Record. It's a newspaper in the Eastern Townships. It was a great newspaper to work at because it was the only other English daily in Quebec besides the Montreal Gazette. And the reason why it was great to work there was real journalists, people who were really interested in, who loved journalism, would work there. The pay was lousy; it was horrible. You couldn't make a living off of it, but it was a newspaper that was taken very seriously. It was run by people who loved journalism. The editor at the time was this legendary guy, Charlie Burry, who has since passed on. But I loved the guy. I showed up for my internship July 1996. The day I arrived, the very first day, it was a Sunday night. I started my shift on a Sunday night, and a woman's body. Her name was Isabelle Budzuk. She was in her early 20s. Her body, she had gone missing for several days, and her disappearance had been reported on before I arrived. And on the day I arrived, they found her body in a forested area near Sherbrooke. And it was that was the big thing that night. Like, it was a breaking news in the newsroom that night. Hey, so another reporter said, "Hey, Charlie Burry, did you see? They found Isabelle Budzuk's body." And I could tell right away. A buzz went through the newsroom, and I realized this is a big story. But I also figured, because my first assignments were, can you just write up these press releases? Can you make briefs out of these press releases? And that I basically assumed that this is my job, that this is an intern's job at the Sherbrooke Record. I resigned to it. I was like, no, I'm happy to have this internship. I can do it. I never thought at all that I would be covering the Isabelle Budzuk case at all. That was my first assumption. The Sherbrooke Record's a very small newspaper. It only has so many reporters, so there's only 3 or 4 reporters working there any given day. That back then. So it was a quiet day. A few days after the body had been found, no one had been arrested yet. She was. I'll give you I'll tell you the story behind it. She was kidnapped off the street. She had been at a bar. She left the bar. She was heading home. She was kidnapped off the street, hauled back to an apartment where 2 other men were waiting. She was raped repeatedly, and then the 2 of the men who raped her put her in a car, drove around to look for, while she was still alive, they drove around to look for a place to get rid of her body. They were making these decisions while she was still alive. Can you imagine the horror? One of them strangled her to death when they finally found a spot where they would get rid of the body. Strangled her to death, but they also beat her about the head with an iron pipe. So it's this quiet day in the newsroom, nothing was going on. I was bored out of my mind. I thought I was going to be working, rewriting press releases again for briefs. When we used to have a pager in the newsroom. It was just all the police forces and the fire department and all kinds of organizations like that, public security organizations, would send out messages on a pager whenever something big happened, just saying, so-and-so was, there's been a homicide at this street and this street. If you want to get details, go to there and we'll give you details on the scene. So the pager went off and it said, arrest made in the murder of Isabelle Budzuk. We're going to bring this guy out of the police station. If you want to get a photo of him, that's where you get it, at the police station. And he's going to be charged at the courthouse later in the afternoon. I looked at the pager, and I was the only reporter in the newsroom, and Charlie Burry, the editor, had just shown up for his shift. So I informed him. I said, Charlie, they made an arrest in the murder of Isabelle Budzuk. And he said, he's quite the character. Charlie Burry said, and I said, so should I call Rita? Rita was a reporter there at the time. No. Should I call so-and-so, Daniel? Should I call Dan? No. So what should I do? He goes, well, go out and cover it. And I couldn't believe I was just 3 or 4 days into my internship. I couldn't believe I was being sent out to this very important story. And he said, he just looked at, he exaggeratedly, in an exaggerated way, he looked around the courtroom and said, kid, you're the only one here, so you got to go cover it. So, and back then they had just started a system where you, not only did you have to report, but you had to take your own photos. So I grabbed this crappy extendable camera that we shared in the newsroom. I grabbed it and I went out to the Sherbrooke police station, and This is I'll never forget it. It's the benefit of being ignorant sometimes. I had no idea how you're supposed to. It's what the police some police still call it a perp walk. They walk the perpetrator, so it's called a perp walk. It's basically it's them giving the media a chance to take a photo of the guy before he goes through the court system. And you're never really going to get a chance to get a photo of him again. And this was by then such a big case that reporters from all over Quebec had come down to see his first court appearance and to try to get images of him before he was put away through the court system. I had no idea how a perp walk worked. And I noticed that reporters, they were at the front, positioned themselves outside the Sherbrooke police station and waited on either side of the walkway that led to a waiting police car. And I remember thinking, wow, these guys are really polite. They're really controlled. They're following this, obviously a set of rules. But I didn't know how concrete those rules were, because the police brought him out, and Charlie Bird told me, make sure you get a good photo of the suspect. So the police are bringing him out, the suspect out. There's one police officer on either side. They're pulling him by his arms. He's not being reluctant. He's walking with them, but they're holding him. One police officer is holding one arm each. And so the police officer on my side was very big, and he was blocking basically my image of blocking me from getting a photo of the suspect, this guy named Marcel Blanchette. So I said, this doesn't work. So I ran out in front of the suspect, and I started to work backwards while I did like a paparazzi, and I just started clicking away, clicking photos of the suspect. His name is Marcel Blanchette. And I'll never forget, the police officers looked like, what on earth is this guy doing? But also, like, one officer looked at the other like, what is he doing? The other one shrugged like, oh, what the hell? He's doing his job. And what they did was they both pulled on gently on his arm and got him to look up. And I was just like about 3 feet away from him as I just clicked these photos of his face. And I could hear in the background, I could hear TV cameramen and these long experienced newspaper photographers yelling, in French, what are you doing? What on earth are you doing? And I just I didn't know there was a set of rules. I didn't know there were these rules that we were supposed to follow. I had no idea. So I just did what I had to do. I got the photo. I got the photos. Then I covered his first formal appearance on the murder charge at the courthouse. I brought the camera back to the newsroom, and our experienced photographer, Perry developed. Back then, not everything was electronic. You had to develop film in a dark room. He developed them, and Perry came out and looked at me, and he said, how on earth did you get these photos? And I told him what I did, and he said, no, you're supposed to follow these rules. Everyone's supposed to wait on either side of the walkway. You're not supposed to get in front of the guy. But wow, man, you got some great images of this guy. And oh, thanks. I didn't think much of it. And then he laid out all the best photos for the day for Charlie Burry to decide which one goes on the front page. And Charlie had gone off, taken a long lunch break, and was coming back. Again, another thing I'll never forget, he walked in and he was whistling a song or something, or humming a song as he walked in. He would spend almost no time at all deciding what would be the front page photo. To him, it should jump out at you right away. So he's walking by, the photos were all laid out. He's humming a song, and all of a sudden the song stops, and he says, holy shit. And he said he thought Perry had taken the photo. He said, Perry, you've outdone yourself. This is one of the best photos you've ever taken. And the guy Perry said, no, the kid took it. And Charlie Burry, what? What? And I said, yeah. He said, you took it with this crappy camera? I said, yeah, I got in front of the guy. And he's like, well, good, you did it. You did your job, great. And the funny thing was not only did it make it on the front page of the Sherbrooke Record, I sold the photo to the Montreal Gazette. When they heard about it and saw it, they wanted it too. But a lot of as I kept doing my internship, a lot of the cameramen and photographers who were crying out to me that day, they later said, that was insane what you did. That was totally insane, but it was impressive. Anyway, so I covered that first court appearance, and not only did the Gazette buy my photo, they also asked me to do a freelance article for the Gazette. So there, within my first week of doing my internship, my byline appeared, if I remember correctly, my byline appeared on the front page of the Montreal Gazette, which really stunned me. And I kept continuing to cover the case, and that's the horrific details of the case. I won't go over them. They're really terrible, but it was cold-blooded. These guys were just monsters. What they could do to another human being was horrific. But I think when I look back, I think that I don't want to say it numbed me, but it prepared me. As I was experiencing this, I thought, this is what covering courts is all about. This is what normally happens. This is what you normally hear in a criminal case. I've only come to realize later on that was one of the most horrific cases in Quebec history. There have been documentaries that have been made on it. And so I think nothing, I'm trying to, I keep searching for the proper term for it, but I think that nothing else surprises me because of that case. And that's why I'm able to cover court. That's why nothing really shocks me. And I remember after I was hired at the Gazette, I covered the biker war, and there was some horrific stuff there too. A reporter from CTV contacted me and said, I'm trying to create a support group for reporters who go through trauma, who experience trauma from reporting what they have to cover. And I wasn't trying to be arrogant. I wasn't trying to be brave. I wasn't trying to boast. I literally said to her, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. And she said, the trauma of having to cover a murder case. Or I said, but again, I don't experience trauma. I'm not witnessing that in person. I'm just hearing an account of it later on, and I'm able to distance myself from what I'm hearing. So I think it's a long way to explain that this is why I think I'm able to cover courts. And also, it can be a labyrinth. It can be intimidating. If you guys end up being an intern at the Gazette or somewhere else at CTV or CJD, and you're sent out, I really don't want. I don't want you to be intimidated at all. Don't be intimidated. That's the best advice I can give you. Just launch yourself into it. It'll sort itself out. Usually if you're being sent to cover something, another reporter's there. They can help you. If you see me at the courthouse, by all means, or if you want to keep my email address, pcherry@postmedia.com, PCHERRY@postmedia.com. If you feel you're intimidated, if you feel you're confused, you send me a question. I'll be happy to answer it. Don't be intimidated. Unfortunately, the Gazette does it too. They send out reporters who have absolutely no court experience and ask them to cover things. I'll give you I won't name the party, but there was a Concordia graduate who maybe about 8 years now. I won't give too many details. I don't want to identify the guy, but he was a summer intern, and he was sent to. I had a day off, and there was a big case coming up, an important date in a case coming up. It was. I'm just going to put in my email address. I think that's what Robin's requesting. There you go. There was a big case coming out that someone was going to plead guilty. I knew that someone in the case was going to plead guilty, and but I wasn't working that day, so I told my assignment editor, "You got to send someone else to cover this case. It's very important." Unfortunately, the only person available was an intern who had no training at all in court. So he went to. All I told the assignment editor. I assumed she was going to send an experienced reporter. I sent her the room it's going to happen, the time, the name of the accused. She knew the background of the case because we had reported on it before. So she sends an intern out there, and the thing happens. The person pleads guilty, and the reporter calls me and says, I really want to quote something that the prosecutor said when the guy pleaded guilty. It's really important. Do you know who the prosecutor's name is? I said, yeah, sure. Well, look, did the prosecutor look like this, like that? Yeah. Well, it's obvious to me the prosecutor was so-and-so. He's the prosecutor in the case. So you can report it that so-and-so said it. That's his name. Okay. Hangs up. Calls me back 30 minutes later. Hey, Paul, I just realized I should be fair and I should try to get some quotes in from the defense. Do you know the defense lawyer's name? So what did the defense lawyer look like? He said it. I said, well, the defense lawyer in the case matches this description, so say that it's so-and-so. Okay. Again, 30 minutes later. Hey, Paul, do you know what the name of the judge is? And again, same drill. What did the judge look like? This is the judge who was supposed to hear the case today, so that's the judge. I did not appreciate getting 3 calls like that, but I don't blame the reporter for that. But see, what I explained to him after was when you go, and this is from the first question that was asked today, you know, what happens when I go to the court? What do I look for? So you look for the role, and this is why I pointed this out. When you find the rule, the long list of names of who's appearing, usually there's a lot of information there, and part of that information is who the defense lawyer is, who the prosecutor is. Usually it's there, and it's important to jot that down because usually during a court hearing, lawyers and judges, they all know each other. So when they say their name for the record, they don't realize someone is hearing their name for the first time, and they tend to say it very fast, so you can miss names very quickly. So you got to try your best to jot down those names from the roll, or you can get it. You can wait patiently after the hearing and ask the lawyers to tell you their name. It's very rare that a lawyer will say, "Get out of here! I don't want to talk to you." They're usually very welcoming. I also want to say that there's not just the Palais de Justice de Montréal that we have to cover. There's many different types of court. There's municipal court. A lot of people think it's just even a lot of reporters, they just assume that municipal court is for like if you get a traffic ticket or a parking ticket and you want to dispute it. That is what they do hear there, but that's not all. They do hear assault cases. They do hear some pretty serious crimes. The municipal courthouse is not very welcoming, I have to say. Not a lot of reporters cover it, so they're not used to seeing reporters there. And when the security guards do see reporters there, they tend to get nervous, and they don't have experience on what, you know, first they don't have experience on the Constitution, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that a reporter has the right to be there. They often hassle us, unfortunately. Eventually, to give you an example, there's a guy, a Quebec singer named Eric Lapointe. He was charged with assaulting his girlfriend. The charge ended up in municipal court. And because he was a pretty famous singer for Francophone media, a lot of Francophone media were covering the case. And on the key date when it got out that he was going to plead guilty, a lot of reporters showed up to cover the guilty plea. And actually security guards, because of COVID-19, they got all nervous, and they actually prevented any reporter from actually covering the guilty plea. So no reporter actually got to witness the guilty plea. They got all the details afterwards from lawyers on both sides of the case. But that's the thing that you face when you cover a courthouse where they don't really normally have to handle reporters. Another courthouse, is the Quebec Court of Appeal. It's on Notre Dame. It's right across the street from the Palais de Justice de Montréal. You could end up covering that quite easily. I cover it quite often. It's more law. Usually evidence is summarized there. Usually it's what the Quebec Court of Appeal hears as points of law. They hear legal matters, legal issues. Let's say for the Jerome Latham case that I just covered, let's say if the defense feels that the judge's last instructions to the jury before they were sequestered, that maybe he, oh, thank you, Angelique, that's very nice of you. That maybe the judge's instructions to the jury had an error or not in how to interpret his testimony. So the defense could very well, I'm just talking hypothetically, the defense could file an appeal that typically in a jury trial, that is usually the point that they appeal on, is the judge's instructions to the jury, because it could end up vague. When a person is talking for a very long time, like I am, your mind tends to wander, and you can make mistakes. So, but a judge's instructions to the jury is very important, and they shouldn't be making mistakes. So what they'll argue at the Quebec Court of Appeal, let's say in Latham's case, if it ever happens, is they'll argue, they're given a limit, I think, of 45 minutes each. They can argue for 45 minutes on why they think a judge made an error in their instructions. I mean, on a daily basis, it's like watching paint dry. You don't want to cover it, it's boring. But let's say in a high-profile murder case like Guy Turcotte, this doctor who murdered his own children, that was one of the biggest murder cases ever in Quebec. When he was found not guilty in the first time because he pleaded that he was mentally unstable, the Crown appealed and argued that there were mistakes made at different stages of the case. But trust me, a lot of media did cover that day, even though the arguments were dry and boring in the Quebec Court of Appeal. A lot of people did cover that. So that's another type of courthouse that you might have to cover. It's actually a beautiful courthouse. If the arguments, if what is being said in court ends up being very dry and boring, I often will be checking out the details of the courtroom. They're quite spectacular. It's very ornate. It's one of my favorite courthouses to cover for that reason. But I should be obviously paying attention. Another court is the Federal Court of Canada. It's in Old Montreal. It's near the Old Port of Montreal. That's even more boring to cover. It's basically everything is written out on paper for judges before a hearing even happens. And what actually happens in a courtroom is a judge will the discussion is basically, you have lawyers and a judge discussing things and making reference, as you know from that email I sent you on March 28th. So they're not talking about even evidence, they're referring to evidence that someone saw in an email. But as I was saying this, I just remembered something. There was one of the most interesting cases I ever covered was at the Federal Courthouse, the Federal Court of Canada. It was a guy who was suspected of being a Russian spy, a spy for Russia. He was arrested, and the Canadian government wanted to have him deported. So when they argued, he was ordered deported by Immigration Canada, an IRB judge, Immigration and Refugee Board judge, decided also he should be deported, but he appealed to the Federal Court of Canada, and they had to argue that case quite at length at the Federal Court of Canada. So that was not a boring case. That was a Russian spy. It was actually very intriguing. That reminds, there's another tribunal, not court, that you might have to cover. It's the Immigration and Refugee Board. This is quite rare that I've ever had to cover, but those cases can be intriguing. There's an actor named Randy Quaid. He was running away from criminal charges in the U.S. and they found him hiding. He's a famous Hollywood actor. They found him hiding here in Montreal, and he had a deportation hearing, and that was done at the Immigration and Refugee Board. That turned out to be quite interesting. That is in the Immigration and Refugee Board is in Complex Guy Favreau. Everyone's asleep.
I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did you find it boring?
No, I found it very interesting. I know that this, I don't think this is what you cover, but you know, where, if you're someone who's interested in reading lawsuits that are being launched,
Ah,
read those at
well,
the court.
thank you. That's something I wanted to mention. Okay, I'll say this very quickly. The Palais de Justice de Montréal, the first courthouse I told you about, the big one that's in near Old Montreal, on Saint Antoine and Saint Laurent. I told you there's a main floor on the main floor is the third floor. The first floor where you would typically enter if you're coming in from the metros, either Champ de Mars or Place d'Armes. If you go in the first floor, if you walk straight ahead, just keep walking. Like as soon as you enter, just keep going straight ahead. You have to kind of do go through a maze now because of the COVID-19, but whatever. It's on the first floor. You just ask anyone. Yeah, even ask like there's guards there. They look intimidating, but they're very friendly people. They're called the special constables. You walk up, just say, "Sorry, Mr. Madame Constable. Can you please show me where the civil court clerk desk is?" They call it the greffier in French. So you walk in, you say, "Excusez-moi, monsieur, madame, pouvez-vous me montrer c'est où le greffe civile de la Palais de Justice?" It's a big counter. It's a service counter. You like if you know the case, if you know someone in the case, hopefully you'll get the right clerk. A lot of it depends on the person you get that day. Seriously. If you take a number, you wait, be super polite, be very nice. You might have to wait a while, be patient. You give your ticket when they call your number. You just say, "I'm looking for a case involving this person. It was filed this year." That can really limit who they're looking for. And a nice clerk will go, "Don't worry, I'll find it for you." They'll find the number. Then they'll ask you to fill out a form. Sorry, you fill out the form, hand it to them. They'll go find the case file. It's in a folder, a brown folder. All the paperwork is in it, and you can go walk off and consult it at a desk nearby. You bring a notepad with you, or you bring your camera with you, and you just take photos of. That's what I do. I take photos. So there's that. If you learn how to use what's called the plumitif system, it's a bit complicated. It's not very user friendly. Every once in a while, through what's called the FPGQ, the Fédération Professionnelle des Journalistes de Québec, every once in a while, Isabelle Richer, if you're familiar with her, she's on Radio Canada. She does a very excellent show at 11:30 on RDI, normally every morning, but she's often booted off by Justin Trudeau with his press conferences, COVID-19 press conferences. But she'll give a course on how to use the publicly accessible court database at the Palais de Justice de Montréal. You could come and ask me, but I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to figure that. I use the private one that's available through the Gazette. It's a luxury that's available to me, and I use it because it's so easy. I've used it so much that I've forgotten how to use the one that's publicly accessible. It's I have to admit it's not user friendly at all. But Isabelle Richer every once in a while does teach a course through the FPGQ. If you follow the FPGQ's website, eventually you'll see she might offer it. She in the past she used to offer it at least once a year. But if you have at least the name of a person and the year the case started, and if you know what the case, if you say, "Look, I'm looking for this class action suit that was brought against Walmart," let's say, for an example, it was brought against Walmart last year. If you end up getting the right clerk, the person will go, "Don't worry about it. I know exactly what you're looking for," and they'll give you the reference number. The key is getting this reference number. For Montreal, it starts with 500 dash something, and then it gets a little bit complicated. It's followed by about 10 other numbers. But you should have an easy time finding the that counter at the courthouse.
Okay,
That's a very good question though, because
and are you able to, what, let's say if you just want to kind of look at the lawsuits that are happening currently, maybe you're not looking for a specific one, you just want to see what's there.
You ask very good questions. Because I'll tell you, there's a trick that we reporters have. Again, I didn't mention this because I don't know what reaction you're going to get at the counter, okay? But I'll tell everyone, you and the 6 other people who decided to stay here, you go to that same counter and you say, I'd like to see the recent lawsuits that have been filed. That's a trick. You seem to know that that's available. What we do.
Well, I think it was I had a class with Aaron Dreffel, and I think that's what he taught us, but I had kind of forgotten how it worked.
Good. I'm glad Aaron was teaching that. I work with Aaron. So that's it. You go and you have to get the right clerk. You have to say, I don't want to say you have to say some magic word or something, but you have to know how to deal with the person. Like, because when I go up, unfortunately, everyone at the courthouse knows me now. Like I'm part of the furniture there. So when I go up to a clerk, it's someone I've seen. It's someone I see 50 times a week. So when I go up, I don't even have to say anything. They just hand it to me. You know what I mean? They just give it to me. They have this little brown box. It looks like an antique now. And there's like usually about a 6-inch pile of lawsuits. Usually you only find maybe one that might be mildly, if you're lucky, you find one that's interesting in that big pile, but you have to look. So you ask, you just say, can I have the pile that's normally available to journalists? You say, I'm a journalism student. This is part of an exercise I'm doing or whatever. I hope that they will be giving you access, but there's sometimes, I'll give you an example. Last week when I missed Jerome Latham's testimony, I thought that wasn't fair. I wanted to get his side of the story into my coverage of his trial. So I had about 5 minutes between another court case that I was covering. But I went to the criminal clerk's office. That's on the 3rd floor. I filed out my form to get a recording of this guy's testimony. If I found the right experienced clerk who's known me for 20 years, I don't even have to say anything. All I say to her, literally, I did this yesterday, is you having a good day? You know, yeah, I'm having a good day. Here you go. She tears off my part of the form, gives it to me, and I don't even say anything, and I walk away. But last week, I got someone new, and someone who decided to be a hard ass, and she was grilling me with questions that made no sense at all. She said, you have to make a down payment in order to have your recording. And I said, yes, if I'm a normal citizen, yes, but I'm a reporter. See, I wrote journalist on my form. Journalists, we don't have to make a deposit. We work here at the courthouse. We're trusted that way. She said, no, I don't care. You have to make a deposit. I said, I don't know what to tell you. I go, look, I can go get my wallet and we can make the deposit, but I'm in a rush. Normally, if you go ask your boss, I'm not supposed to make a deposit. She goes, okay, fine. She goes, but since you expect special treatment, you have to fill out your number. That's what she said, your number on the form. And I said, I'm sorry, I was trying to be as polite as possible because I'll have to deal with this person for most of my career. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're referring to as a number. You want me to fill out a space that if a legal aid lawyer wants the recording and wants it for free, he has to put his legal aid lawyer code in. They get a code. I go, I think that's what you're referring to, right? And you think that there's one for journalists, am I right? She goes, yes, there is one. And I said, there isn't one. I've been doing this for 20 years. There is none. I pulled out my FPGQ membership card. I said, there's a number on here. Do you want me to put that on there? Do you think, no, I wasn't being sarcastic. I see you laughing. I was trying to hold back on the sarcasm. I said, do you think that will help you in what you think is supposed to happen here? And she started to realize that I knew what I was talking about. And she said, no, okay, forget about it. And she took my request. So all that to say is you never know who you're going to get at that counter, and it's luck. And be patient, be polite, be polite. I told the woman 5 times, I don't mean to be impolite, but I kept saying that. And like people were starting to look at me like, who is this guy? Because I was chill. I kept calm. I explained it, and I eventually won the argument. But this is the things you're going to be confronted with.